Speaking of not the Russos, Lord Miller, we got another story about them. The Lego Movie 2 is happening, and they are actually rewriting the script, and they will be tackling gender differences. The main issue I want them to tackle, and this is an important one, is that why, and actually it's totally a joke, but why the female characters, they still have the shape of the Lego brick, but yet you see the lines drawn in for their hips. Why not just shave that out?
Yeah, I've been trying to figure that out. I look at the character, and
you look at Wild Style, yeah.
And I don't know if maybe where the leg things are, maybe there's not enough internal space, but then they've got the Lego Friends figures, and maybe that's going to play into this because they want to do more with gender differences, and maybe that'll be, oh well, Lego Friends, they're the skinny ones, and then you've got the normal Lego figures that are just, you know, these guys that everybody loves.
There's some Geek Squad Lego figures that were sent out by, I think, Webroot or something to the Best Buy stores, and one of them is a female agent, which is, I was really excited that they did that they thought about having multiple genders represented. One of the things that I liked about the first Lego movie, though, is that there were female characters involved, because when I was a kid, I had my Mego superhero figures, and it never occurred to me that I was only supposed to play with the boy figures, or that the female figures are supposed to be secondary, or my Star Wars figures. Again, you know, Leia was just as important to the stories that I was playing out with them as any other character, probably more important, because I recognized her, whereas I didn't recognize a lot of the other characters, or they were just slightly known, and they had a cool name and backing card for the figure from the packaging. But what I'm confused about, and not terribly confused, is it sounds like part of what they're doing with the gender differences is they're involving the Duplo blocks, because the kid in the movie is dealing with his little sister coming in and disrupting his play with her stuff and having her kind of take over, which is not necessarily a gender fight as it is an age fight. And certainly that girls might play differently than boys, but I think, again, you're going to see it more from the perspective because she's a young girl versus an older boy, and how they like to interact with their toys and stuff. At least it's not the girls are relegated to the pink aisle of Toys R Us, like a lot of other stuff, like even Toy Story went into, is, oh, you've got all your toys, you've got aliens and cowboys and all these other things, and I've got Barbie and Ken. I had a cousin who was my age. We all played with the stuff together, and she definitely had Barbie figures and a Wonder Woman Barbie style doll that I was happy to play with when I was there. But a lot of the stuff had a lot of crossover, and it didn't matter what our gender was.
And I want to throw to Patrick on this real quick before I do that. I want to say, because me, it's the exact opposite. You know, I have a sister. She's 2 years younger than me, and you know, this is our childhood room. I just took it over because she got married and moved out. But you know, we had each our own toys. You know, I was the kid sitting there, you know, on my half of the room playing with my Legos and stuff, and she's over there playing with her Barbies. And, you know, very stereotypical. You know, with me, it was Legos and Transformers. With her, it was Barbie and whatever else she played with. You know, this is like 15 years ago, so I don't know. I don't remember. And you like, and then you, like, so I definitely relate to this because, you know, older brother, little sister, you know, the voice upstairs is saying, hey, you got to let your sister play too. And it's like, oh, she's just going to bring her Barbies in here and I'm playing Lego, not Barbie. And all that stuff. But Patrick, what about you? I mean, like, what are your thoughts on that part? Like the whole, you know, sibling dynamic.
Well, I didn't have a sister. I have a younger brother, and so we had in our basement a ping pong table that was covered in Lego. We built our own city, but we had the female characters back in the 80s. They all had the hair that came out to the side, and so they were an active part of our city, whether they're working in the medical center or they're at the house. Some of them were at the spaceport or in the castle. The leader of the castle was a queen, I think.
Yeah.
And or princess. I don't know. That's my brother's stuff. But yeah, I know I'm gonna my son's going to have Lego with female characters, and they'll just be part of that. So,
yeah, when I grew up in the 70s, the gender cutoff was more because of how the toys were sold to us than it was that we made those choices. And I think that we've grown and somewhat. I mean, look how hard it is still to get Marvel superhero figures with female characters in them. For a long time, it was like, oh yeah, we don't want to sell these characters. We're selling them to boys, and it's like, well, what if the girls enjoy them? And so they were canceling cartoons because girls were watching instead of boys watching that they thought they couldn't sell them the toys. That's one of the reasons why I guess they said that they canceled Young Justice and some other stuff. Or Black Widow is the one who's riding on the motorcycle in Age of Ultron, but in the action figures, you see Captain America riding the motorcycle because Cap's got a bike and Black Widow doesn't. It's like, well, they both do to a degree, and they both should and can. But I agree. I think it's nice to see that your kids aren't going to have that same level of girls play with this and boys play with this, and girls cut hair and become hairdressers and stuff, and boys have war figures and stuff.
And when I was growing up, I liked Lego on its own. There were no ads on TV getting me to buy the latest sets. There was no cartoon series. It was just, you get the box, all you can see is what's on the front and what's on the back, and then there'd be a catalog in the middle, but you'd have to make up your own stories. And so built the world however I wanted to build it, and there was no marketing telling me, well, these sets are for boys, these sets are for girls. Now granted, there were the Paradisa sets, which were pink, and so it didn't really interest me when there's spaceships on the other page.
Right.
But there was one set that had a pool, and it was Paradisa and it was pink. I always thought, oh, it'd be cool to have that set because there's a pool, and I could have the characters in the pool. It was different than any other piece I had.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to have my guys have a pool party in there.
Oh yeah. See, now this is where I mean, you're putting me to shame because I came into it. I think I had like 2 sets that weren't Star Wars, and but one was a space shuttle set, and then it was all like Star Wars sets. There's like, because growing up, I was big into Star Wars. I still am, but I mean, it was like, everything was Star Wars, and so I was like, I even still have up on my dresser over here, on top, I still have Lego Star Wars Legos up there, and so it was always, I would build the ship, and then after a while, I'd be like, well, let's modify, and then it was, let's take it apart and then build my own ship. And so that's basically what I did now. And actually, I think I have 3 up there that I built that are custom, and in my mind the physics work, but probably not really. So the other part I want to get your guys' opinion on is the fact that this is actually going to do, for a Lego movie, this is going to do something really interesting. This is going to tell the story from 2 perspectives as opposed to just one. So you're getting it both from Finn, the boy, and the first, the live action bits from his, where Emmett is the hero, but how is this going to look like for Finn's sister? Is Emmett going to be the hero, or is he just going to be a bumbling buffoon?
When I read that, the first thing that came to mind was, I think the book was The Pigman, where each chapter was written by alternating characters. So there's a boy and a girl, and they'd take turns writing chapters. And so you'd see each perspective, and they'd kind of comment on the previous one as if they're like, no, that's not how it happened. And so I think it would be interesting to see the movie in that sort of way. Like, okay, here's Finn. He's down there playing with his Lego, and this stuff happens. And then, oh, he's going to go wash up. Oh, now it's his sister playing. And oh, now this, that could be fun.
But with that, though, that almost seems more like a TV show than a movie.
Well, a few minutes of this, a few minutes of that, and then ultimately it comes together, and they have this big battle, but then they'll come together in the end, and everything works out, and we can cooperate and fight Lord Business or whoever the bad guy is.
Just real fast, have you guys ever read that Exquisite Corpse? It's a meme that was passed around for a while. It's an Exquisite Corpse is a story where one person takes the first line of the story and the next person writes the next line, and so on and so forth. And there was one going around that two students were given an assignment that they had to write together, and the girl started writing her story, and it was going to be a teenage girl typical love story. And then the guy starts writing his part of it, and it becomes instantly about her character is killed off, and like Space Marines show up and start doing it, and she keeps going back and forth. But the Space Marines decide that what they really are looking for is love, and it's just like the whole back and forth that was so perfectly stereotypical, gender biased, but it was still incredibly funny. And you just made me think about that with the Pigman thing, which now I want to read. There was also a superhero book called Soon I Shall Be Invincible that was written with two perspectives. It was the villain of the book who had killed, I guess, the main superhero, was trying to reestablish himself. And then the new heroine joining the Justice League style team and everything. It would go back and forth between the two. It was almost written like a blog, but from two different characters' perspectives. I don't know where I was going with any of this. It just reminded me about those things.
One trap I hope they don't fall into with this, though, is because it mentioned Duplo. And so I hope they don't say, oh, well, girls, they have these Duplo blocks, they're inferior, and, you know, the girly, and here's Emmett, he's the hero that we know from the last movie. I hope it's not Duplo versus Lego, because Duplo has its time and a place, and it's for babies. And hopefully this girl has grown up and moved past the Duplo. We can get into the actual real gender dynamics and not so much age dynamics.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I agree with that 100%, because I like to emphasize that, because like you were talking about with the Lego Friends line and stuff like that, I would rather see that. So I would hope that they would age the characters, 2 or 3 years to where, she's not playing with Duplo anymore. She's playing, with his Legos, but then with the Lego Friends line and stuff like that.
Yeah. And they probably want to market that because they need to.
Honestly, I could honestly look at that like, if there's a way to market like a combining of the two, like to where there's a little bit more, which Lego Movie would do that to where, we get, because it's all, even now we get the girl characters, the Lego Friends, they're, more built like actual people, as opposed to like bricks and basic shapes of people. Then maybe that would lead to, better Lego designs overall when it, with the merchandising and stuff like that.
Well, my niece she's 14 now, but she's never had any interest in Lego Friends. Even though they've got equestrian sets and she's big into horses, she really doesn't want Friends because she thinks the people look weird. And she's so used to the classic characters.
Yeah, right.
She's had handed down to her and gotten her on her own.
That's the stereotypical thing of female fantasy armor with the breast cutouts and everything, or whatever it is just, you don't need to change something to make it appeal to girls or women. If they're into what it is you're doing, then they're into it for what it is, not because you had to sexualize it or genderfy it for their purposes. It's like, no, there's certainly something to be said for maybe some young women want to see their armor look more attractive, and that's fine, but that's not what it should all be about. And if you have a character that's interested in that, then that could be the story that you tell. But yeah, I completely get it. It's like, oh, I like Legos. Oh, great. Well, here's Legos for girls. I don't like Legos for girls. I like Legos.
Exactly. Yeah. And then back in the day, they used to advertise girls and boys playing it with magazine ads. They didn't have TV ads, but they'd both be playing with the same sets. But I guess they think they need to do it separate. So
I don't know. I look at this, since I work at Target, and I walk down the aisles all the time, and I see how they have the aisles set up right now for Lego. They have the Lego Friends and the Disney Legos on one side of the aisle, and then the other is the not necessarily licensed, because the licensed stuff like Star Wars, Minecraft go on the other side, but the superheroes, the Marvel ones are on this the side over the opposite of it, to where, and then it's like the more generic, like architecture, and then regular buildings and stuff like that. Opposite, I could see them, sort of then blending those two aisles together. That's my hope. My other fear that I have, and I don't know if you guys share this, is I'm hoping we don't get outcry of people going, well, why isn't there a female writer? Just because, like, I feel like we could fall into this trap here of it's being written by guys. How are they going to tell the girls' point of view when they're not girls and stuff like that? Like, that's one thing that just sort of popped in my head as I'm looking at this, like the whole, well, boys versus girls thing. Well, how they know they're not girls and stuff like that,
As someone who sometimes tells stories, it would be really horrible for me if I was only able to ever tell stories from a white 40-something-year-old male's perspective. So I get why there needs to be more representation from writers of different genders, identities, races, everything else. I completely agree with that because it brings in new stories that maybe us crazy old white guys can't come up with on our own, or maybe we can, but we just don't because it's not what we're used to doing. I absolutely am in love with having a more inclusive Hollywood and more inclusive creativity across the board in books, in comics, and everything. But yeah, the idea of pushing it so far as that only women can tell stories about women and only African Americans can tell stories about African Americans. It's just something that if you are a person who is a male that is telling those stories, you need to be really conscious of what you're telling and making sure that you don't just follow stereotypes because that's all you've known.
I only bring that up just because, I could see people doing that when they're watching a movie like, oh, that was a good movie. But wait, there was no female writers. I'm mad now. Really, like they're probably looking at this more of from the kid perspective that I think they, Lord Miller or the other, the other writers involved might have daughters and they might see how they play with their toys and stuff like that and the stories that they tell. It reminds me, I don't know if you guys ever saw the YouTube series on Geek and Sundry written by a kid where they had kids in general telling these stories and then they had it was either animated or they had actors acting out what the kids were talking about. And it's a great example because here you had boys and you had girls and they were telling completely different stories, and then sometimes they were telling very similar stories, and it was just it was what it was. And it's just, I don't really have a point with this.
No, Axe Cop is a very good example of that. Axe Cop was the guy who was drawing out the stories that his little brother was telling him, making up. I also love seeing the artwork of girls who've drawn creatures or superheroes that they've designed and stuff like that, and then a more established comic book style artist or fantasy artist has taken that and drawn it to look more in lines with popular art and everything. And you see it kind of taking that next level. I love that kind of thing because, again, the imagination of kids is something that is so valuable because they are fearless. And when we get older, I think we allow ourselves to feel like, oh, well, that's too far out there for me to reach for, and I'm just going to play it safer in this little book house over here.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Any last thoughts on this before we move on?
Lord Miller should stick to Lego-related movies, and that's it.
What about Clone High?
Well, I don't know anything about that, but maybe.
Oh,
that was their first thing that they got success from. It was an MTV series that lasted for one season. Basically, the premise was these clones of famous people are in this high school.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a really good cartoon.
Yeah, on MTV. Well, they also had Daria and Beavis and Butthead, but after that when they were, after Beavis and Butthead and Daria, when this came out, it was in the 2000s when it was all about the real world.
For more on this Galactic Network podcast, go to gncast.com. That's GNCASTS.com.